There are a lot of methods and a lot of people out there telling you what you should do and what you shouldn't do if you want to learn English. And some of these advices could work, but some of them are just slowing you down. And you end up thinking that you're not good at languages or you're not making any progress at all, and now you're frustrated. But here's one thing. English is not academic. English is flexible. So most of us were taught English the same way as we were taught maths and chemistry and physics. And the academic system has this big box where they fit everything in there. We are supposed to learn everything the same. You know, with rules, definitions, grammar, and well, all of this formula and this structure that is academic. But English, at least if you want to become fluent, doesn't have to be there. Because English is not just information. Clearly it has patterns and it has a structure, but it's not just that. It's not just knowledge, not just that informational aspect. English is flexible, and English is a skill that you need to develop in order to be fluent and to use it in real life. So that's why English doesn't have to be in that same box as everything else. It has to have its own space. And if we force this idea and this method, this academic method, into our process, then we can end up quitting, or the process might be just very slow and we end up translating in our head not very fluently. And you could end up thinking that you are the problem, when actually the problem is not you, it's the method that you're using. Because a child doesn't need a book. If they're learning their first language, they are not reading grammar, they're not memorizing and copying and writing and doing these things. They are just existing, and they are just using the language and not focusing on the language. They're not thinking, I need to talk to my mom to get food, so I need to learn how to speak perfectly. And you don't see children speak perfectly. Eventually it happens, but it's something that their brain just does. And maybe you have heard this phrase before, learn like a child, but our brains have changed. And we talked about that last time also. We have now stress, responsibilities, we have a limited amount of time, limited amount of energy. So that is the challenge. That's the paradigm that we based on nature. But I found somebody who has been helping a lot of people with this idea and this paradigm. He had a program with this concept of nature. How do we learn like children, but with our adult brains? His name is Sal, and he's the observant. He's the one who has all the information, so I talked to him, and I'm gonna give you what you came here for. And these are 10 things that you need to become fluent in English, or not need, but you can maybe check it out if you want to become fluent in English, based on all of this and all this concept of nature. So let's go. So here I have the list of the 10 things that you need to achieve fluency. So let's go through them one by one. Starting with, process the language, don't study it.
Process the language, use the language, interact with the language, don't study it. Don't treat it as it's something that needs to be understood. It's just something that needs to be made familiar with and use, right? You don't have to study the grammatical concepts and the grammatical names and all these other things. You really have to just use it, and you'll get to the point where it becomes easier and easier, and it becomes more and more natural to the point that you're fluent. It takes planning to do that. I'm not saying it just happens like magically, but that's how we acquired a language in the first place, and that's what we should stick to. An example of how that would look is just by having a conversation or trying to have a conversation, as opposed to studying a book, right? So the conversation is interactive, you're processing, you're trying to understand, and then you're using your recall to try to answer. You're processing the language. Eventually you'll get better at it, as anything that you try, you'll get better at. If you're just trying to study it and it's static, it doesn't have any life, right? So it's not as nature intended to be something that's used flexibly.
All right. 2, use the R.A.C system, recognize, accept, and copy. What is that?
Yeah, so this is something we do. So it's only the R.A.C system just so we can identify it. It's not actually a system that you have to do any differently than what you're going to do. But if you recognize that how we learn is by recognizing things, so we understand them and then we accept them because we get familiar with them, and then we copy them because we're so familiar with them, then we do it. And that's basically how we acquire language, right? So you hear something so often, you understand its context. After a while, you feel pretty comfortable with it, and then you can go ahead and do it yourself, right? That's the system. So that's what you should work on. Just recognizing, accepting, and copying, not memorization, and not abstract things that don't promote that process, because that's how the brain wants to process the language. That's what we do with everything that's not academic, right? So there are certain things that are academic and need to be memorized, who need to be understood deeply. Engineering would be a good example of that. But this is a process that we do for all kinds of things. An example would be if you move to a new city and you have to use its subway system. Let's say Tokyo. It's amazingly complex, at least the first time you look at it. You don't recognize anything. You don't know what the symbols mean. You don't know what the colors mean. You don't know what anything means. But after you spend a little bit of time with it, you start to recognize a pattern. Okay, so this line does this, these colors do this. I start to recognize how it works. You start using it, and then you start getting pretty comfortable with it, to where you're like, okay, now I kind of understand how it works. And you see another person there, you know, after a couple of months, and they're pretty lost, and you can just, hey, let me tell you how it works, and you explain it to them. It's the same process. You recognize, you accept, you copy. It's that process.
All right, okay. 3, never connect vocabulary to words, only to objects and ideas.
So this is what we did from the very beginning. So obviously, when we first started out with our original language, we didn't have another language to attach it to. So this is what nature wants. Nature wants you to recognize sounds and what they mean, right? So when the mother keeps feeding the baby with a bottle, and she gets bottle or baba, the baby starts to understand through recognition, like, oh, that means food, right? Now it could get used to that, and then when it wants to get some food, when mom's not right there with the bottle, it'll start going baba, mama, baba. It's a communication pattern, right? So that's what nature wants us to do. So as adults, we obviously don't have to do that. Fully capable of expressing ourselves through more advanced means. But you don't want to attach your language to English and have to go through your language to access it. You want to go with the English directly to ideas, objects, thoughts. This means this, and get in the habit of acquiring vocabulary and acquiring the patterns directly, English to ideas, not through your native language.
So no translation?
Correct. No translation. We can use your base language to understand what's going on, but you don't attach English to your other language for understanding of what something is, right? So you don't go from English to Japanese, if that's what you speak, to understand, oh, we're talking about food. No, you should go directly with the English, food. You should be able to access it that way directly. You got to work at it.
Okay. 4, never memorize, but build a strong recall ability.
So memorization, and again, we might use that word in different ways, but to me, memorization is to burn something in your memory. It's almost like a one-time use. If you're going to memorize the answers to a test, it's really effective. You take the test the next day, you put in the right answers, you're good to go. Next week after that, you don't remember anything. Right? You memorized it, it's for a purpose, usually like a one-time purpose, giving a speech. Language is different. Language is something we're going to use all the time. And so you have to have a recall. And the brain will file things in a way when it knows it needs to constantly use that file, use those words, it'll recall. The more connections you make to those words, the more the brain understands that's something we need to, keep ready. That's the difference between memorization. And especially if you're memorizing language to other language. So if you're memorizing words in English by memorizing them next to your native words and you memorize them together, it's very inefficient. It's not going to lead to fluency. It'll help you to memorize words, but that's not what the brain wants, in order to be fluent.
5, always stay in the zone between boredom and confusion.
Right. So when we are applying ourselves to acquiring English, when we're doing this, we have to stay within a zone. So we are processing the language, right? So the boredom side of the zone is when something's too easy and you're just not paying attention and you fade away. You are, detaching. You're bored. I think we all understand that. You don't really want to be bored. The other side of the zone is confusion. And if you don't know what's going on or you can't process enough, you're just confused, that's where the connection to the language stops. You detach and you're not processing the language. You're actually not doing anything useful at that point. An example of that would be like trying to watch a TV show in English when you don't understand anything that's going on. It's going to take a long time for your brain to figure out the pattern and what's going on and turn that into, usable, comprehensible input. So you're confused. Get in the range, get in the place where you can process 90% of it and start, processing and adding on that 10% and moving that along. It's much more efficient. You want to stay in that range for maximum efficiency.
Okay, and how do we stay in that range?
Yeah, just understand what you're doing in the moment. Like, is it too slow or is it too fast? I think we all know when we're doing something. Just kind of check yourself, because I get it. It's hard to understand sometimes if you're watching a show. Should I be this confused? Or you really shouldn't be that confused. If you can't understand most of it, to where I understand most of it, but I don't know this word, or I don't know what that phrase means, that's where you want to be. You don't want to be where like you just don't know what's going on. Doesn't do you any good.
Okay. All right. 6. Our brain loves patterns and rhythm, so feed it what it likes.
So if you really want to go faster and better, you have to focus in, or you have to get accustomed to the patterns. Every language has a pattern. English definitely has a pattern. And certain things just come together in a package. Those are the patterns. And the more you practice those patterns and the rhythms, all right, the brain loves rhythms. It loves music. It loves those things. But more than anything, it's getting accustomed to the patterns. And you'll process it much more quickly. Instead of trying to understand everything in singularity, everything independently, just know that things come in packages. And once you understand those patterns that come along, then you'll use the language much more easily.
Okay, 7. Process as much data as you can at one time for peak efficiency.
Right. I think a lot of people don't think about this. They think about, well, I'm doing something, so it's good. I think you have to really take a closer look. If you really want to move faster, you really want to get a language in a certain period of time, you have to be processing a pretty good amount of data, and the brain could do it. So if you're doing very simple exercises, fill in the blank kind of stuff, which word is missing, spell this word, it's really low impact, low data passing for amount of time that you're spending on it. You want to spend time where a lot of data is passing, maybe rapid fire questions, conversation where you have to speak and you have to comprehend and you have to ask and you have to answer. If you were able to do more higher impact exercises, then it would be much more efficient and you go a lot faster. It's just the way that it is. And not everybody understands that because they just don't think about it, but
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's continue. 8. Build strong connections by using language in a flexible way.
Sure. Well, that's what language is about, right? Conversation is flexible. So you don't want to go down the path of memorization and static, just acquiring words that you're going to put in a file somewhere and maybe use at some future point. You want to take on vocabulary and start using it in different ways, right? So it could be something as simple as if you're talking about things that you're going to see every day, a glass, is the glass full? Where is the glass? What is it made of? Whose glass is this? That's flexible because you're talking about the glass. You're involving it in different ways, right? So it's a very simple example. And the brain is making pathways and more pathways because it's coming at it in different ways. It's not just a memorized thing. It came at it one way. Very hard to access something that you memorized. And as you are exposed to things and you use them over and over, it's going to be so much more easy. And obviously, you're going to be able to, to use those words flexibly because you learn them flexibly.
Okay, this one is pretty similar to never memorize, but build strong recall ability, right?
Yeah. It's on the same lines, and some of these obviously have overlap and kind of say these things because it's not obvious to people. It's not obvious that you shouldn't memorize. So in explaining it, different ways, you really get the meaning of it and you can understand why you don't want to do that.
All right, 9. Practice proper patterns and pronunciation by copying native speakers.
Right. So the best thing you can do is copy, right? You're going to recognize, accept, and copy. That's what you're going to do even if you study. Yeah, and people don't realize that. You can study all you want, but eventually you're going to have to copy people. And how do we know this? Well, whenever you talk to somebody, and whether it's their native language or they learn a language, you'll hear a certain accent. If somebody goes off to Australia to learn English, they're going to have an Australian accent to some degree when they speak, because they're copying what they hear, because that's the natural process. So plan on doing that. Plan on exposing yourself and copying natives. Don't try to acquire things, especially when you're first starting, from a book. When you don't know how the pronunciation is, you are imagining it, and then you're practicing it, and you're making something imperfect into your habits and your everyday journey. You want to just copy the natives. That's what we're trying to do. That's what children did. That's the natural way to do it. And you want to spend more time exposed to natives as opposed to people who are not speaking natively, so you can get more access to good content to copy.
Okay. And 10, seek advancement, not perfection.
Trying to be perfect at something that you're just starting out and that's complex is really, it's not only not a good idea, it's impossible. It's impossible to be perfect at something that you just don't have exposure to, you have no knowledge of. Perfection, if that's what you want, is a better idea to go after later, and it's more attainable later after you can process the language. So when we look at children, they don't say anything properly. They're just figuring it out, they're trying it, they're using it. Maybe by 5th grade, they start to speak pretty clearly and with proper grammar and all those other things, but it's a process. So follow that same process. Work on using the language, expanding it. Don't hold back because you're not perfect. Go forward and use it. I'm not saying practice mistakes. Try to be as proper as you can, but don't stop and worry about, is this a mistake? If you recognize a mistake, then you can fix a mistake. But don't be paranoid and stop because you may make a mistake.
All right, thank you, Sal.
You're welcome.
So as you can see, all of this is based on something very simple. It's nature and observation. And I know this went a little bit fast, but don't worry, because we're going to break down and we're going to go deeper in each of these for you to understand, with examples and tools that you can use to help you become fluent in English. That is the goal of this channel, and if that's your goal, you can join us. Stay tuned, and in the next episode we're going to go with the first one, that is process the language, don't study it. Because remember that it's not about learning it, it's about acquiring it. So that's where we're going to start next time. So see you there.